Hey, period two. I can't be with you today. I have a meeting, so I wanted to make this video so that you could just keep doing what we were supposed to do if I was in the room, and that way you'll still be caught up with my other classes. We'll be on schedule. We're going to finish this up today, and then we'll be on schedule to take a test on this on Tuesday. I will have a review ready for you on Monday. Remember, as we go through, everything that's highlighted is going to be on that test. I wanted to do a quick review of what we've done so far before we finish this up. So we started with the Navigation Acts the other day. I reminded you that England is the boss and they control all of our trade. The Americans don't really love this, but they're pretty much used to it, I guess. They are going to smuggle some of the goods that are being taxed so they could avoid those taxes, which of course is illegal. The British are basically telling them, quit complaining, you're part of the greatest empire the world has ever seen, and you really should feel blessed to be a part of it. So that's been the situation for over 100 years until, of course, the French and Indian War happens, and that's going to change everything. The Sugar Act is passed a year after the war ends in order to raise money to pay off the war debt. It's just basically a tax on sugar, and it's the first time that they've passed an act specifically to raise money from the colonists. And of course, the colonists are going to complain about taxation without representation. They say we shouldn't have to pay taxes to a government that does not allow us to be represented in that government. So they're going to boycott the sugar and they're going to smuggle it to avoid the taxes, both of which are very effective. They're also going to organize for the first time. This is a very non-violent and peaceful way to organize. They are just sending letters and publishing editorials in newspapers and circulating pamphlets, trying to get support for the boycotts, and they're actually very successful. The British are going to crack down by putting the smugglers on trial without a jury, and they treat them as if they are guilty until proven innocent, which is the opposite of how it is supposed to be. This is not really effective in raising tax revenue because of the boycotts, so they're basically going to get rid of it and try a new idea about a year later with the Stamp Act. This time they put a tax on paper products because they figure it's going to be a lot harder to avoid paying it. The colonists are going to react a little more violently this time by forming the Sons of Liberty. That's a group that's going to terrorize tax collectors to try to scare them from doing their jobs. They're still going to try boycotting the stamps and paper products, which actually is quite effective. And they're going to ask Parliament to repeal it. We sent a group over there led by Ben Franklin to meet with Parliament. Parliament basically says, you guys are complaining about nothing. All of our British subjects pay a similar tax. I don't know what the problem is here, but fine, we will get rid of it because your boycotts really are hurting our businesses. However, from this point on, you need to do what we say. We have the right to pass any law that we want. We are the boss, and you need to follow the rules. So, fast forward a couple of years, and they pass the Townshend Acts. This time, it's a tax on a whole list of items, everyday items that people use. And this time, they claim the money is necessary to pay military that needs to be stationed here because the Americans keep misbehaving themselves. The Americans are going to boycott these products again, although it's getting harder and harder to do. This time, the women get involved by forming the Daughters of Liberty. And the Americans really are protesting that standing army that is here in the colonies. And they claim that that really is their number one concern. They are going to expand their hit list beyond tax collectors. They start terrorizing customs officials as well. The British are going to react to all of the smuggling by allowing writs of assistance, which means British officials are allowed to search American property without a warrant. So that's yet another violation of American rights. And this is going to culminate at the Boston Massacre in 1770. Some Americans gathered to heckle some soldiers. Things got out of hand. They started throwing things at them. Next thing you know, shots are being fired, and 5 Americans are dead. When word gets back to London about what happened, Parliament realizes this is getting out of control, so they repealed most of those taxes, but they did keep the tax on tea. The problem is, how do you collect the tax on tea if Americans keep smuggling it and boycotting it. So their answer is the Tea Act. In 1774, they passed this, which gives the British East India Company exclusive rights to sell their tea directly to the colonies. The goal is to lower prices and therefore collect more taxes, because they figure if tea is cheaper, Americans will be more likely to purchase it legally and therefore pay their taxes. But they were very wrong. They misjudged the colonists completely. It is not the price of things that concerns us. It is the fact that this would create a monopoly. And we don't like monopolies in America. We like competition, because that is the healthy way of doing business, and it keeps prices in check. So that's really the problem. And therefore, the Sons of Liberty organized what we call the Boston Tea Party. They dressed up as Mohawk Indians. They boarded the East India Company's ships in the middle of the night in the Boston Harbor, and they threw all of the tea overboard into the ocean, costing that company over $1 million in today's money. Well, needless to say, the British have had it with the Americans. They're totally out of control, and the British feel like they need to be punished. So they are going to pass a list of acts that they call the coercive acts, because they are trying to coerce us into behaving ourselves. But the Americans are going to nickname them the intolerable acts, because they feel like they cannot be tolerated. And that takes us to where you need to start reading again in the book. The next one is the intolerable acts. This is actually the last one. You're going to find it on page 112 in your books. So you're going to need to open your books to page 112 and read just that page. It's actually a very short reading. See if you can record the information into your PowerPoint slides. And then when you are done, you're going to come back to this video, and I'm going to walk you through so that we can make sure we have the information that we need. So at this point, you can pause this video, and then when everybody's ready, you guys can press play again to compare your answers to mine. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, we're back with the intolerable acts. It was a short reading, but it's actually a very long list of laws. Let's get started. These laws are going to be focused mainly on Boston and the colony of Massachusetts, which is where Boston is located, because that seems to be the epicenter of this rebellion, in case you haven't noticed. They're going to start by closing Boston Harbor. This is going to cripple the economy of that area, because it is the busiest harbor, I think, actually in all of the colonies, but definitely in that area. So this is going to put a lot of people out of business and create product shortages. They also canceled the Massachusetts Charter. A charter is permission to govern yourself. And by canceling that, that means that now the Americans in Massachusetts are no longer able to govern themselves. The king is going to send over his own men to do it for him. This is a big blow. Royal officials will now be sent to England for their trials. So if any royal official is suspected or accused of a crime, normally they would have just been put on trial in America, but now they're going to be sent back to England for their trial, which means they will probably never be brought to justice. The Quartering Act is also part of this list. Quarter means like where you live. Your quarters is where you live, your shelter. So this literally means that colonists were forced to shelter British soldiers. In other words, if a British soldier shows up at your door and says, I need a place to stay, you have to let them stay in your house. And you have to feed them as well, and they can stay as long as they want. This is especially troublesome in Boston, where the colonists felt like the British soldiers were the enemy. So you can imagine how uncomfortable that would be, and they hated it. And finally, the Intolerable Acts also appointed a new governor for Massachusetts, somebody who was handpicked by the king and is basically just going to be his puppet. This is really bad. This is really bad for the Americans. It is taking away their self-government, a lot of their freedoms, and violating most of their rights. They're obviously upset that their rights are being violated. They're going to publish propaganda. Propaganda is anything that is supporting one side over another. So that would be things like pamphlets, editorials in newspapers, posters, artwork, political cartoons, like anything they can do to convince other colonists in other places that what's going on in Boston is a major problem and it could spread to other colonies. If they can do this to Massachusetts, why not Pennsylvania? Why not South Carolina, you know? And they're trying to get the word out so that they can get support from other places, because up to this point, they have felt kind of isolated, them and New York City. They are going to continue boycotting British goods. It's pretty easy to boycott when your harbor's closed, but they're also going to encourage colonists in other colonies to boycott as well. This is really the first time that you see the colonies uniting as a group. Up to this point, the major cities in the north were basically on their own when it came to rebelling against the crown. But now, when word gets out of what's going on up in Boston, people in other colonies really do take notice, and they start to think if it can happen to them, it can happen to us. So maybe we should come together as a group. And they do. And you will see what the reaction is and where this takes us next week when we move on to the next part of Module 4. So that wraps up the Revolutionary Acts. This really was the final straw for the Americans, and they're going to take it to the next level now. We'll take a test on this on Tuesday. We'll do a review on Monday. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please let me know. Make sure you highlight what I have highlighted, because that's what's on your test. You can pause this if you need more time. Otherwise, I am going to move on to the next activity, which is the stock market updates. Today is Friday, and every Friday we are going to update our stock market chart. So while I'm opening mine, you can go ahead and get yours opened up as well. Feel free to pause this video at any point if I'm moving too quickly. I have an example here. I'm going to pretend that I'm following Walmart, and you can see that I've typed Walmart's company name at the top along with their symbol, WMT. I typed in their initial purchase price. That was how much one stock of Walmart cost last Friday when we started this project. I put in there why I bought it. I said they've performed very well, especially through the pandemic. At this point, you should have all of your yellow blocks filled in, and you should have submitted this to me in the stock purchases Dropbox on Schoology. If you did not do that yet, you need to do that today so I can look it over and give you a grade. Today, all we have to do is update the values for September 3rd, because that's today's date. So I am going to go to my Stocks app, and I'm going to, actually, you know what I can do? I can do a split screen, and you guys can do the same if you think that's easier. So on my screen over on my Stocks app, I can see that Walmart, it's in my watch list, so it's showing up here. The value right now is 148.56. That's all I need. So let's say your other company is Nike. You would go over to your Nike column and you would type in the value of Nike right now, which is, for me, 163.67. But for you, it's going to be different because I'm doing this at 9 o'clock at night, and you're obviously doing it during the trading day. So make sure you're using the numbers that you're seeing on your screen. Don't use numbers that I have. So that's all you need to do. You need to put your 3 numbers in for your 3 companies and just save it. You know, if you're in the OneDrive, you just hit the back arrow and that automatically saves it for you. And that's all. You do not need to submit anything else today. Okay? So at this point, you are finished with the assignments that I wanted to walk through with you. And you guys have yourselves a nice weekend, and just follow any further instructions that your substitute has for you. I'll see you guys next week. Enjoy your 3-day weekend.